Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott, and I'm super excited. Today we have Ginette Biro, an amazing author who has had some incredible experiences that we've got to talk about. And I can't wait for you to meet her and talk about some of the amazing stuff that she's been through. Ginette is a medium and cosmic channeler. She's claircognizant, clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. Every day she sees things we don't see, hears things we don't hear, and feels things that we don't feel. And she's a bridge between worlds, our world and the expanse beyond, what we can see or know with our five senses. In her amazing book I just finished that I highly recommend is Avalon to Aurora, Lessons from the Other Side to Guide Your Life on Earth. And Ginette has this amazing story. She had a near-death experience and shares her experiences in traveling to Avalon, which is Aurora, and all of the amazing stories about walk-ins and death walkers and so many other things about the ideas of choice. So I just can't wait to talk to her. So welcome to the Reality Revolution, Ginette.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so pumped to be here. And I have to tell you, I came upon your stuff from a friend of mine. My friend Tony and her daughter Kaylin listen to your stuff all the time. And they were like, you need to listen to this guy. I was like, okay, tell me about it. And this was a while back. And then I have listened to your stuff and I resonate with so much of it. So I just have to say, to be here chatting with you and sharing stories like this is truly an honor. So
wow. Well, I'm so honored. And I have so many questions to ask. You've seen other worlds and dimensions. You've heard and spoken to other spirits, and through your courses and your coaching with you've had some amazing stories. So let's tell the story a little bit for the people listening that may not know about you, about your near-death experience. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, so let's go back to, I have been a practicing medium for over a decade now. So like functionally willing to sit face to face with people and do this. So growing up, I've always known there was things that were different about me, but it took me a while to figure that out. But I had already been a medium. I already believed in this stuff. I already talked to spirits about crossing over, but it just compounded and expanded even more in August 2019 when I had my NDE. So in my near-death experience, I was having a routine surgery. And it was in that surgery that I had this opportunity to cross over to the other side. And it was so profound, and it was so different than any astral travel, any spirit communication. I mean, I've seen peaks of the other side, but that's like watching through a screen, right? Like astrally through a screen or through a window. And it's different when you're on the other side of that window, literally on the ground. And that's what it was for me. And so I remember walking, I found myself on the other side, walking on this green grass. It was like the greenest grass. And I was walking on it, and I realized as I was walking, I could see any blade of grass I wanted just by zooming in on it. Like I could just see the details, even though I was standing. And then I remember I looked up, and it was this most beautiful blue summer sky. Like, you know, that perfect blue summer sky. And I came upon this picnic type barbecue, summer barbecue type thing. And that's where all of my family and friends that have crossed over, and even ones from past lives that I knew, and I knew that I knew them, they were all there. And it was this welcoming home. And I knew where I was. Like I knew that I was literally on the other side. There was no doubt about it. There was no guessing. And so I spent what felt like hours there connecting with them and hugging them. And it was like when you meet people you haven't seen in a long time and you just pick up where you left off. Like it was that with all of them. And so I spent what felt like hours. And then it was after that, my grandmother came and she'd passed, and she took me to this other place altogether, this room of the blueprints, I call it. And it was this white room with this giant white boardroom table. And outside the windows was like galaxies. We were at like the edge of universe, like where universe is creating itself, is what it felt like.
Oh, wow.
And I was with my council and they rolled out these blueprints. And I remember kind of thinking it was almost funny. I was like, wow, they look like blueprints on Earth, right? Because they were blue. And Spirit had always explained it to me like a tapestry, right? Like we weave a tapestry of our lives, but I'd never seen it like a blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
And so we unroll these blueprints and there was this line down the center, this iridescent, like pulsing line of life. And we reviewed my whole life up until this juncture point. And so it was fantastic to be at that juncture point because after we went over it, and this was with my council, they said, now, do you want to stay or do you want to go back? And I was like, oh, well, I want to go back. Right. And it wasn't like a fear-based bargaining, please let me back. It just was like so clear and concise. It was like, oh, well, yeah, I want to go back. And so they said, they're like, okay, if you want to go back, you can. You don't have to. What you've done up till now is complete, but you can. And so I was like, yeah, I want to go back. And so they said, well, okay, now if you're going to do that with what's remaining in your blueprint, which to me is like 6 inches long, and I don't know what that reference is because I don't recall. Like in my memory, there's a guide in the way. I can't see how far out my blueprint went.
Right.
So whatever these 6 inches are, right? They're like, you can change out some things. And so I was looking at it. It was like these fuses. There's just like fuse pieces almost. And I pulled one out, which was the first one, which was chronic health. And they told me you'll remember the first one, but you won't remember the other ones. And so I remember I pulled it out because I had a lot of chronic health issues. And I was holding this like fuse of chronic health issues. And I was like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah. And so I remember putting it down and picking up a different one of health and like clicking it into my blueprint. And it was such a vivid, tangible realization of how much we do create our blueprint on the other side before we come into this life of specific lessons. So anyways, I got to take that one out and put in a new one. And then I did that for a couple other ones, but I don't recall the details of what they are. And it was at that point again that they asked, they're like, do you want to stay? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, no, I want to go back. And so basically I share all of this because we made a deal that I say it's a deal. It wasn't really a deal. I just agreed that if I go back, I'm going to make the most of it. And I'm going to step up. And they encouraged me to step up and share my story, share my experiences, share my knowledge as a medium, speak about who I am and what I do. And so that really is what led me to write the book and really put myself out there. Was the NDE, like launched me basically.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little more about this place that you went. Do you suspect it's a place miles away, or is it a dimension that you entered into? What's your feelings about this place? This is the other side, we call, and you refer to it as Avalon. So talk about what your perspective of what this place that you went to probably is. I mean, how do we know for sure, right? But
well, exactly, right? It's just sharing of stories. But my understanding, the first location, that barbecue picnic, that was heaven to me, if I could use a very traditional word. The other side, Avalon is what Spirit had called it. That was just basically like another dimension, right? A higher dimension around us all the time. That's what that was. The one that was different though for me was that room of the blueprints. Right. Like that was far. So I love that you're asking this question because that was far away. That was like at the edges of the universe, like I said, where it's creating itself. Like you could feel this push of creation energy from that space. And again,
I got that from your book. That was actual, that place was a place. If you were to fly, it would take trillions of years to get there, but it's, it was far. Wow. It was far. Yeah. Amazing. So that tells us a lot. We have soul blueprints then, and we choose to have chronic health issues for some particular reason, perhaps as a catalyst to help us to overcome some particular issue, maybe in a past incarnation. Why do you think we would choose? I mean, I've actually suspected this with other people I've hypnotized. Why would we choose chronic health issues? Why do you think, what would be the soul lesson that we would learn from that?
Yeah, you know, what's really interesting is I was talking was talking to my guides just this morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually talking to my guides just this morning about that question. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny you're
Yeah.
asking. It's divine timing. One of the greatest things is when we come in for an incarnation here, when we are embodied as a human, this is a denser embodiment, right? 3D denser embodiment,
Right.
where we really have the opportunity to learn through experiences and gain growth in experiences. And not all of those experiences benefit us being only good. When we are really, when we hit like a tower card moment, right? When we hit a moment where life crumbles, whether it be chronic health, loss of someone, loss of relationship, those tower moments help us dig deeper into self to truly ask who we are. What are we about? What are we made of? What do we then want to do because of the limitation placed on us? Because if we're never given a limitation of something we have to think critically and out of the box about, we're never going to grow bigger as a result, right? We'll just keep doing the same. The body wants to be in homeostasis. The energy likes to be in homeostasis. Unless we trigger that to make it work harder, it's not going to really change.
Right.
So that's kind of what they were saying this morning. And I got to say, I agree. Like, I was reflecting this morning of pivotal moments in my life where it's crumbled. And those were times I really had the opportunity to say, okay, well, who am I now?
I can't disagree with it, even though it's frustrating to think I would put myself through that. It's true. I mean, without those things that I've gone through that have been tough or hard, similar to a chronic health scenario, I wouldn't have had the growth. Now, you talk a lot in the book about choice, and I read channelings from Quo and some others that talk about the unique nature of this density that we're in. It's the density of choice. And although we're making individual choices all the time, it's a really powerful part of what we're in, this illusion or dream or whatever we call it. There in particular is there's a very important choice we're making also about ourselves that leads us to branch off to another path in the next incarnation. I wanted to get your perspective through your experience, if that's true. The channelings I've read are we have to make a choice if we're choosing to serve ourselves or serve others, and you can see it in everything we do. It's being presented to us as our choice, and we're trying to choose. Well, what is it I want to do on my soul path? Do I want to focus exclusively on myself, or do I want to branch out and really focus on serving others? Did you get that feeling when you were, because I got some of that from what you were talking about in this idea of choice in this reality?
Absolutely. That is one of the biggest messages in my book, is conscious choice, and how we create the perception of our reality in every moment based on what we're choosing to do as a result of the things that happen. Right. So as a soul, we choose destiny points, like those fuses I talked about, right? These fuses are going to help me learn certain lessons. But then my free will human ability of conscious choice dictates how I maneuver those destiny points, dictates whether I need to repeat several lessons 20 times over in this lifetime because I'm just not getting it. Or if I move through it and transcend it and learn and grow from it. And so I think, having learned that lesson, anytime something comes up for me now that maybe is triggering, or I'm like, oh man, I'm really cautious of, or more thoughtful of, okay, so this is this is something that's happening, but what am I doing now? Because every time we stop and consciously choose and feel into what feels most aligned in our response, we are then aligning our soul path. And that is, I think, such a key part in soul ascension.
There's almost a choice or intention energy that's involved by that part of us that's making that conscious choice. There's some sort of energy involved with that.
Absolutely.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So help me to share the medium's world, because it's hard for me to perceive. My grandfather was sort of a medium. He would always be speaking to people that weren't there and telling us, oh, Uncle John was here. And I've never been able to fully understand it. You're clairaudient, you're clairsentient. You're always seeing auras. Tell me what it's like to walk around in your shoes with this sort of heightened awareness. It's got to be frustrating sometimes Can you turn it off and on? Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I see, hear, and feel spirits. Okay. At any given time. I have to consciously turn it off, which I've gotten really good at now. It used to be a real burden when I was younger. It was happening to me and I didn't realize I could control it. But yeah, I mean, I see orbs often, daily, nighttime, especially if my husband and I are watching TV, there's tons of visitors that pass through the room. It's a regular occurrence. I just don't even talk about it anymore. Not that he would be bothered by it, but it's a normal occurrence, as is getting these like clairsentient or precognitive notions of so-and-so is going to call, so-and-so is going to text, oh, this is coming or this happened, and then it texts. And like, there's a lot happening, as well as hearing spirit or feeling spirit. I mean, even when we sat down, just as we started, I felt my guides come near and they were like, whoosh, like they showed up just at the last minute to the party.
Hey
right?
guys, how's it going?
Yeah. And I was like, hey guys, we need to simmer. Otherwise I won't be able to talk properly. Right. So there's always this, balancing of it, but at the same time, now that I've learned it, I absolutely appreciate it big time. I do consciously in readings and sessions turn it on and increase my frequency, and then after sessions decrease my frequency a bit. Because if I go out, say to the grocery store after doing a session for somebody and I stay that high vibe, I will be completely overwhelmed in the store with other people's energies, their people in spirit, maybe my people. It's just like a noisy concert. Right. Yeah.
So the times that I've been able to at least have access to that other world have mostly been in dreams for me. And the times that I've felt like I was seeing my dead father, my mother, several of those times, and I've had this in discussions with other mediums, they had no clue they were dead. They were still living out a sort of simulation, and they were younger, they looked younger, and it was like they maybe had chosen, they were still going through lessons. Maybe they didn't learn in this reality. Have you ever encountered that? I mean, obviously there's some spirits that totally know what's going on, but then there's some that are still on a certain soul journey, and for them to know that they have died maybe is not helpful. Have you seen this in any of your encounters?
Yeah, I've seen something similar, and maybe this one will resonate for you or not, but there are some times where a soul passes over and, you know, they're resisting the fact that they crossed over. And so in that case, you can communicate with them and talk to them and help them see the light and cross them over. But what I'm really getting from what you're saying too is, because we have these multiple parallel timelines, right? Like the soul fragments, if I can use that word, into many different versions of itself in a singular incarnation. So what I have seen before is a soul has passed away in one or two timelines, but not in another. So sometimes they will come through as the energy in another timeline where in fact they are still alive. And so to them, maybe in your dream state, you were astral traveling and perceiving them in their alive state in that timeline, yet they're no longer alive in your timeline.
Right. Now, you mentioned something in the book called the soul aspect, meaning that you've met versions of yourself in other realities. It's an aspect of yourself. How did you come to the understanding it was just a soul aspect, or it wasn't just, explain to me your experiences in that realm?
Yeah. So there was a couple different ones. And it took me a while to really understand it. And I had to have my guides actually explain it several times over, because it took me a while for my brain to wrap itself around this idea. I at first questioned if I was seeing past lives of myself, and some could say sure, because past, present, future is happening all at the same time.
Right.
But these ones, I remember one of them, I speak about the pink Grecian style dress or the peach one in the book.
Right, I remember that.
And that version of me knew that I was seeing her in real time. And then I was shown that it was real time. And so that one was one of the key first indicators of like, wait, this is happening at the same time, but that's a totally different dimension. And then it happened another couple times. And there was another one where my husband and I are married and we have kids, but I was pregnant with a third, which we don't have. I miscarried a third in this lifetime, but in that lifetime, I was pregnant with that third. And it was vivid. And I knew in that was happening simultaneously. and I was observing it. And so it was
Wow.
my guide showing me these moments of simultaneous timelines versus past lives. I've seen past lives of mine before, but there was a different energy to it. It wasn't, again, this current fusion.
Right.
So, I mean, as I started embarking on the idea of parallel timelines, my mind just kind of exploded open. And I was like, guys, I don't know about this. This is a lot. And they're like, oh, come on, you can handle it. Just look at what we're showing you. And so it was a series of events for me that helped me to understand that. And it was often observing myself in another timeline where that self observed me.
Right.
In this timeline. And so it was like an acknowledgement, like as I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, we know we're in communication. And it was like that in those moments as well.
Now, I always like to, when I talk to mediums, especially now, I like to get your view of what's sort of happening on the planet. Obviously, there's changes in the way that people are acting, the way that people are spiritualizing. And in our environment that we're in, it appears that the thought ends up becoming reality much faster. So obviously, from all these trends, my mind says there's sort of a reality revolution. There's something happening. What is your impression of what's happening? If you were to describe it, what's happening to the world?
I think we are, I was shown this just the other day, actually, and I was shown Mother Earth pushing this energy of 5D consciousness out from her, right? Like it's like the earth itself holds a 5D consciousness, not a 3D consciousness. But on that runs a 3D element, which much of humanity is in. But it's pushing through that, it's 5D consciousness. And what that means is it's exposing and triggering and asking people to notice what's happening around, shining a light on it, exposing it. At the same time, asking people, what are you going to do now that you know this? Who are you now? What are you connecting in? And all of that is helping to raise consciousness, right? And the more people that start questioning as they start looking up versus looking down, they start questioning these things, and those questions create ripples in their energy, which then trigger other people to question. And so we're starting to get these like pockets of ripples picking up, which as they ripple and connect together is creating this almost like a grid or a blanket of electricity energetically that allows people to tune in to the knowings of more things, which is why manifestation can come faster when we are more in tune.
Wow. I love that description. Part of that 5D aspect, I think, especially for people that are still asleep, is that they're unconscious, which is the things we thought in the dark and before, seems to be conscious now. Things that we were secretly desiring or hating or angering, those things are not secret anymore. People are more willing to just, say their deep unconscious thoughts. Are you seeing this? Do you understand what
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, at the same time, we're also getting more people willing to step up and share their stories. And so, this old ancient principle of the sharing of stories, elders would share stories, which would then teach people things through the sharing of stories. And so we're starting to see that in many different ways, exposing things of the negative stories, but also sharing the positive and the out of the box spiritual reality revolution stories. You know what I mean? Like the consciousness stories, which are giving people more tools to start to think more critically for themselves. And then that comes back to conscious choice. But we have to see everything, or as much as we can, to make it a conscious choice, not just a dictated choice.
Right.
So we have to see the light in the dark of it.
What do you say to those mediums out there like you that don't understand what's going on? People say, hey, you're insane. You got some kind of psychosis. I'm sure that this happens a lot when what you're talking about for many people seems out of the realm of reality. What do you say to those? I mean, there are people that are maybe suffering, hearing voices, seeing things. It's tough, right?
It is a tough thing. And I think unless you grow up in a family of mediums, I did not grow up in a family of mediums. For those that have that wise grandmother or the parent who's a medium, like hang on to them in their wisdom. I would say that. If you don't have that, as I didn't, there's a lot of questioning that's going to happen, and you are going to hit those roadblocks of anxiety. You are going to hit those roadblocks of questioning your sanity. But what I would say is start noticing what you notice. Notice the things that come to you, and if they align with a happening or information, because the more you start to notice what you notice, and they start to, make sense, come to fruition, or they're validated by somebody, the more you're going to realize you're not making it up and you're not crazy. But it takes a willingness to jump into that and be willing to speak it. And that is the scariest, most daunting part in the beginning, is to speak a shaky truth. Right. And I had been there many times. And so I really empathize with people that are feeling more, seeing more. Be willing to share it somehow, to just start, even if it's just journaling or writing it down, get it out somehow and start to notice what you notice as you get it out.
Fantastic. Now, along the way, you make some incredible observations in the book of things I've got to talk about. Yeah. So the death walkers, which, like you say, it sounds like a scary thing. But there are these death walkers that help people prepare for death. Yeah. Explain to me your experiences with death walkers.
Yeah. And I love that you comment on the term, because when Spirit gave me the term, I was like, are you guys really? And they're like, oh, what we'll call it. So they really are responsible for helping a soul gather all their parts, basically gather their fragments. They will help one aspect of a soul, if it's crossed over, kind of like we talked about, and there's still others, they will help to keep things compartmentalized if needed for the other aspects to live out their journey. Or if a soul does die, in all of them, help them gather all the fragments. They basically are those, the ones that kind of help align certain things that people talk about. They're like, oh, before my grandfather died, he phoned me randomly and we had this conversation of closure, or he got all his papers organized or redid his will. Like, it's those things. Our spirit guides will do that as well. But there's times when death walkers will come in and literally help us prepare for that. Just as we have people come and help us prepare for birth when we're receiving a soul, they help a soul prepare for transitioning over to the other side.
Wow. Now, have you seen what they look like?
No, not specifically. Usually they're just kind of like a shadow outline of a figure, very generic looking to me, but they always kind of present themselves with this energy, and energetically, I hear the word death walker, if I could say it that way. Again, it's hard to explain. It's a knowing combined with a visual.
I wonder about entities like this, or even your guides, if some of them are previously incarnated as humans and they choose to do service as a death walker or a guide in a later. I wonder if there's some cases where that happens.
Absolutely. I think especially with our lifetime guides, like we all have a lifetime guide, and that's what I call it, is a lifetime guide. There's different terms, I imagine, but spirit that agrees to parallel you from the moment you're born to the moment you cross over, right? They're kind of like your PR person, your personal assistant, your go-to guide. Some people have more than one that help facilitate all the other guides, angels, whatever that come into your path. So oftentimes our lifetime guides, we've either paired with them before in a lifetime, or we've actually swapped roles depending on where our ascension is. But most of the time, our lifetime guides are going to be somebody that knows us well or has had many lifetimes that can actually draw from their experiences to help guide us better. But at the same time, they're still figuring it out too. There's times where I've talked to my guides and they're like, okay, so we're doing our best right now. We're trying to figure out the best way to help you in this situation. Just give us time, because we're not professionals either. We're high dimension, yes, but we are still learning also. Right. So it's a learning through dimensions.
If for somebody out there that wants to connect with their guides but can't, what do you usually say?
Oh, well, I mean, talking to them first and foremost. You might feel like you're talking to air, right? Or talking to the wall. Speaking to them, when you do that, whether it's out loud or in your mind, they always hear you. They always hear you. So if you start to open up that communication with them and say, listen, I'm told you're there. I would like to know you're there. I'm here. I'm ready to receive. Can you bring me through some signs, symbols, connections, voices, whatever the person's comfortable with? And they'll come through in dream state. They'll come through number patterns, maybe songs on the radio. Maybe when you talk to them, you always end up seeing a white butterfly, and maybe that becomes your symbol. Like they'll forge a path so that you get to know who they are. but it really requires you first being willing to receive them.
Right.
Right. Like we have to make an invitation for the most part to invite them in. Otherwise our receptivity is closed off and we're going to miss it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the higher self is not the guides and is
Mhm.
something else. Have you connected to the higher self? And
Mhm.
what is your understanding of the difference?
So the higher self, the way I've been shown, is different than the guides, but can also guide us and can
Mhm.
also come through in readings. So the way they explained it to me is like, if you picture a pie, right?
Right.
And you cut that pie into many pieces, but we'll just say several, and one triangle of that pie comes down as an incarnation. So one piece of your whole self, your higher self, comes down as an incarnation. So I am one slice of my pie, right? And I live my life. And when I cross back over, I connect back in with the entirety of my whole soul, right? The many different lifetimes I've had are all within that full pie. And so when we're connecting to our higher self, it is a greater aspect of us. And we can gain information, we can talk to it, obviously, in hypnotherapy, connecting to the higher self. It can speak, it is, some would maybe call it the oversoul, but is the greater aspect of who we are when we come into embodiment.
Right. Okay. That makes sense to me.
Mhm.
So the other thing that I'm fascinated by, especially people that listen to the podcast, is walk-ins, and you
Yeah.
had some discussion of that in your book.
Mhm.
So tell me about your experiences with some people. I get that think that they are a walk-in, clearly or not,
Mhm.
or the way they understand. Some people are walk-ins and they don't know it.
Mhm.
And so there's a whole variety. And I've read Ruth Montgomery's book about walk-ins. I'm
Mhm.
fascinated by it. The
Mhm.
idea that Abraham Lincoln was a walk-in is
Oh, interesting.
fascinates me, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about your experiences, and are we seeing more of them?
I think actually, yes, we are. It was in February this year that my guides came through and said, we are seeing and will continue to see more walk-ins.
Mhm.
Because basically, a walk-in, for those that haven't heard about it, which I'm sure on your show they have, but a walk-in is when another soul makes an agreement with the natal soul, the soul that's born into the body, that at some point there will be an exchange. And so the natal soul will leave or take a break if needed. And the walk-in soul will come in either temporarily or permanently and carry on, because it is in the best interest of the walk-in soul not to come in during birth and the growing up years, right? Sometimes you will have such a high vibrational soul walking in that it can't actually incarnate into a baby body, right? It
Right.
can't actually incarnate into a lowered consciousness or a constrained consciousness. It needs room to stretch and bend in an adult consciousness.
Right.
And so sometimes walk-ins will do that. What we're seeing right now is more walk-ins of higher consciousness to help swiftly increase consciousness on the planet. So we have more people shifting in, whether again they are braiding, kind of sharing the space with the natal soul, or completely
Mhm.
taking over, bringing in higher conscious thought, innovation, shift, change, new ways of doing things. We're going to see more people presenting new ways of um, creating significant structures on our planet,
Mhm.
significant political structures, societal structures, all that kind of stuff, to really change it. And so we're seeing this influx of higher beings stepping in versus taking those 20 some, 30 some years of growth to get to that point of remembering.
If somebody suspects that they are a walk-in, what
Mhm.
would you recommend they do? How would they, find out what their status is?
I mean, they could do so with a really good past life regressionist or a
Mhm.
regressionist that can regress them into that. It could come through in a mediumship reading. I've had that come through a couple times for me. Um, a big thing though would be to, and again, there's no blanket statement for all of it though, right?
Right.
Every journey is so individualized. But if I was to give a somewhat general statement, would be that a walk-in will usually know there is something significantly different. And especially the ones coming in now are coming in with such a bigger basket of consciousness of who they are, there's an awareness of being a walk-in. So it's like if your life has significantly, drastically changed since an accident, an injury, a surgery, something like that, where your personality is seeming very different, your interests have skyrocketed in a certain direction of helping humanity in some form. Say you come in suddenly having different language skills than you did before, all those kinds of things, those are big indicators of something significantly different. But we can also have, though, a style of walk-in, which is like a higher self drop down.
Right.
So sometimes some walk-ins, or some people think they're a walk-in, but really they've just had more of their higher self come down into consciousness. It's still them, it's just more.
Right.
So it's more when you're seeing like the drastic difference, I would say, would be an indicator of a separate soul.
Right.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So since you had this experience, have you revisited Avalon? Tell me more about how you've sort of filtered this experience, and since it happened and how it's affected you.
Well, it really, like I said, I already had a belief of there being the other side. I'd already talked to enough spirits, but when I came back, I was like, well, there's absolutely no doubt. Like, there's just no doubt. Even if there was a 0.01% of doubt of questioning myself in readings, there's just no doubt now. So that has really shifted my concept of mortality, not in the fact that I'm frivolous about it, but more in the fact of it's just even giving me so much more of a push to make a difference here and now, because I realize the value of my soul perspective versus the human me perspective. From the soul perspective, how much I valued the human life and all that I had accomplished, and how I would not have wanted to put any of that to waste. And so I remember that vividly. So now it's like my intentions are so much more full, because I'm like, I'm not wasting this. Like, I came back for this.
Right.
So that would be one thing. Another thing, though, would be that a lot of my connections and access to spirit has really opened up even more so since. So I find it's easy for me to spend a lot of time up in the higher realms connecting with higher beings. And so I have to work harder on grounding on earth and finding that balance point, because it's a different journey on planet Earth versus in spirit. It's very, very different. It's much more dense. It's much more emotional than the spirit world. But again, like I said, there's so much value in it. So I just keep remembering the value, and I'm getting to work, right? Doing what I agreed to do. Like I said, I made that deal. And so I'm doing the deal. Yeah.
Do you think that these levels of spirit world are actual entire civilizations with whole other things going on? It's not just like we all think it's heaven, it's the afterlife, but it's much more going on. It's a whole other world with characters and all kinds of dramas and different things going on, right? It's not heaven necessarily the way we were taught as children.
No, right? It's so much of it is what we create it to be too, right? Like, there's different places, and I don't have the full understanding of this. I only have my experiences in it, right? But I have seen other people on the other side where, when I call their spirit forward, they're fishing in a river, and the river looks like rivers on earth, but they're fly fishing, and they put their rod down and they come over and they chat. I've seen others who are camping in a tent. I've seen others who are on a hammock in Mexico resting. That's their resting place of gathering their soul together. I've seen others who expand completely into cosmic energy, and they're not form. They're stars and planets and consciousness, right? And so I've seen it that way, but I've also seen others being busy prepping, gathering with family, and milling around. So it's so much more vast than we can even describe with our conscious minds here. Right. So it's so much of what we wish it to be, what our souls desire to learn as we carry on, not limited by the human body, and then even farther beyond it, more than we can even conceptualize.
Do you have a crazy story to tell? Something that you've seen or experienced as a medium that is mind blowing, something completely unexpected? Or do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah. I have lots. here's an interesting one about, which maybe some people would resonate with. There are times when our soul can travel to visit other people while we're still alive, and we can see that.
Right.
And so I had an experience one time where I was sitting in my living room, and all of a sudden this spirit, in quotations, kind of appears in my living room in her nightgown. And I looked at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, because it was someone I knew. And I thought, oh, well, if I'm seeing her in spirit, she died. Right. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh no. So the next day I heard nothing, no text, no nothing. And the next day I texted her like, hey, how was your sleep? Not knowing when I'm going to get back. She's like, oh, great. It was fine. And I'm thinking like, what the heck happened? And I was like, I think I saw you last night. Were you wearing these jammies? And I described them. And she said, yes. And she literally showed up in my living room. And so
Wow.
we as people do that. We astral travel to different places all the time. And so to be able to see that was really, really interesting. Another one I want to talk about in astral travel, which is kind of funny. My husband, I didn't know I could do this. And this was profound in the power of the mind. My husband went on this month-long hike in the wilderness. It was this journey he wanted to take. So I said, yeah, go. And he had said to me, I will give you my GPS coordinates every night so you know where I am. So I said, okay, sure, no problem. So first couple nights, get the GPS, all is well. And then 7 nights in, I think it was, nothing. So I'm like, okay, no big deal. Next night, nothing. Starting to be like, third night, nothing. And his family starts asking, and fourth night, nothing. Now I'm panicking and I'm talking to my neighbors. Long story short, we had to file a missing persons report with the sheriff's department, the whole shebang. And at one point I was like, okay, Ginette, if you think you're a medium of any kind and you think you can connect to spirit, tune in here, get out of your human way. And so I pulled my whole consciousness together as I could explain it. And I propelled it out to wherever he was. And I was like, let me know if he's alive or not. And all of a sudden I felt my mind go like whoosh, out from my forehead, all of a sudden zoomed into seeing him walking over this rocky crest in a specific shirt, all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, I think he's okay. I think that's what I saw, right? And when you're a medium and there's a really unnerving situation for self, it's hard to separate the mind and worry, right? So I was like, I think he's okay. Long story short, the next night, on the 5th night of being missing, he phones, all was well, his GPS broke down. But I asked him, I said, hey, yesterday at about this time of day, were you on this rocky outcrop? The rocks look like this. You had this shirt on. I believe it was this green shirt, something around your waist. And he's like, yeah, I did.
Wow.
And I was
amazing.
like, holy smokes. And so even having done mediumship and connecting with spirit, I was amazed by the power of our minds to be able to do that in a focused state. And I'm not saying my mind was amazing. I'm saying the power of the human mind, when we pull our consciousness together with an intent, can do some amazing things sometimes.
It's so true.
Yeah.
You mentioned astral travel several times. Do you do it automatically, or do you have a technique that you use to astrally travel?
I have tried to learn different techniques. I remember I'd gotten some books sometimes and I couldn't quite follow the different techniques. For me, it tends to kind of happen. It's actually quite funny, but it's almost like it's up to my guides. And suddenly I get like yarded. It feels like I'm pulled right out of my body and I'm off on an adventure.
Right.
And so there have been times where it has not been a ideal location for that to happen. And I kind of have to be like, no, not now. Right. And pull it back. So most of my astral travels are when spirit takes me on a journey, and it's very different than just connecting in with the higher realms. I literally feel like I'm there, not as vivid though as the other side in my NDE, but it's like, it's the difference of regular spirit communication or seeing things could be like watching a movie, where astral travel to me is like going to a play where you're seeing real people. And whereas heaven and the other side is like being in the play. Right. So that's kind of how I would separate them a little bit differently.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
In your interpretation, what happens to souls that are just horrible in this density? You know, the Adolf Hitler. What happens to them? Where do they end up going? How does the spirit handle it what is your experience? What is your idea that happens to those that are obviously have done just terrible evil?
Horrible things.
Right.
Yeah. So some of that I don't know. Some of it I have an inclination about. What I do know is that when people cross over, there's a life review of sorts. I did mine at my blueprint at a table, but often people I've seen from spirit showing me, they go through this like movie almost of their life. And in that, they experience the ways in which they've treated people from the perspective of those people. So for people that have been very dark on this planet, they have to come face to face with who they've been based on the perspective of those that they inflicted the thing on. So the judgment actually comes from them experiencing it. So that's one part. I don't think people can escape that. And it's not that it's meant to be painful. It's just that it's meant to be real. It's meant to be, this was what was, just so you know, right? It's meant to be real. So there's that part. I do also know, though, that all souls have the opportunity to be of light and to remedy, to surrender, to heal, to grow and ascend into light. So I don't think any soul is damned, if we want to say it that way. Any soul is permanently dark, but I have seen some very, very dark energies before in the world of spirit that I would imagine just still haven't found their light yet. Right. But I do believe that all souls can return to that source energy, which is of light.
Right. Now, one thing that you offer is a light worker mentorship on your website. So you're helping light workers. Tell me a little bit more about that. The people that want to bring the light, that want to be light workers. What's the process involved in, and how can we help them?
Yeah, so it's a level 1 and a level 2 course that I teach, and basically it's for people that are curious of what's happening to them, people that have had a few maybe minor experiences, even to people that are like, there's something up with me, I see spirits, I don't know how to deal with it, right? So it's that whole spectrum. And basically I say to people, I compare it to a backpack, right? Where I have done this journey of a backpack and packing my pack to journey with spirit many times over. So what I'm offering in the courses is to teach people how to pack it, what they need, and then they can go on their journey and throw out whatever they don't want or use what they want, but it gives them that foundation. Because I found, for me, learning my skills, learning the communication, learning discernment of spirits, what are high vibe, what are low vibe, where are my boundaries? How do I ask for more clarity? What does clarity look like? I had to figure out a lot of that. And so that's why I kind of put it together to be like, here's a basis of information so that you can start to make sense of what's happening. So you don't have to feel crazy, first of all. And then second of all, you can actually create a really beautiful connection with your guides or wherever you choose to take it.
Right. So
that's kind of what I do in that. And it's a really fun course. It's really interactive. We get right into stuff right away, and lots of time for questions and laughter. We always get laughter. The guides keep it really funny when they come through. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
So one thing, in the spiritual world, a lot of people talk about, I need to cleanse the energy. I need to cleanse the energy of my environment. On a few occasions, I've seen what appear to be entities that feed on fear, like that feed on limited number. And I've read about that. If I want to cleanse my house and keep the energies positive and sort of block any negative energies, what would I do? What would you recommend as somebody that can see these energies? What is the most effective way to do that?
Well, so energies can only reside in a matched frequency, right? Like they can, so if they can play on your fear and you match that with fear, then you match the frequency and they can hang out. The minute you respond to that with like a love energy, or you transcend through that, choosing not to be afraid or choosing to switch it, you switch your frequency and they can no longer really hang about. So when you're cleansing your space, basically you're clearing up the frequency, you're heightening the frequency to the best that it can be. And so for some, your intent alone can do that. Our heart power, our power of energy from our heart space and love can do that. So for some people, standing in their home and just almost picturing themselves like those Care Bears when they like beam out the hearts, It's like beam out light from your heart space and you can clear your whole house. You could picture light from your heart shining in every room of your house. And even that can do it. But others, I mean, I will smudge my house with either Palo Santo incense sometimes if I really like the smell. And again, I'm adding my energy, the power that I feel from actually lighting something in the smoke and the ether. And I walk around my house and I say a prayer or a mantra or an intent of clearing the energy and lightening it. And then what I always do, this is just a Ginette special, but I always open the doors and windows after, and I let in actual light and air. And I let in some element, let in solar consciousness, let in air and your own energy. And for many cases, that in itself is enough. There are times though where, you know, there's a really pesky energy either attached to the house or an object or a situation that you can have a shaman come in or something like that to do a greater task. Absolutely. But I think there's so much we can do when we tap into that unlimited aspect of self.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you ever seen any angels?
Yeah, I have.
What do they look like?
Oh man, angels have this beautiful energy. And I know for some people, they say angels and light beings, same thing. Angels and aliens, same thing, from the sky. Whatever you want to believe is fine. My experience, which was rather significant, was before my daughter was born, before I had my daughter, before she was conceived, I had spirit kind of like knocking on my door, which is what they do. They knock on me and they're like, hey, we got to talk to you. And so I tune in, I'm like, what's going on? And they said, you are going to be carrying a daughter, but your frequency is not ready for her. I was like, oh, okay. What do you need? And they're like, we need to do an upgrade. I'm like, all right, not knowing what this was going to be. And so I was like, okay. And I sat down on this chair. And as soon as I tuned in was this massive, bright, almost orangey yellow, but bright white light in the middle that almost shot out like wings, but it was all light. So it was a light form with light like wings, and basically like beamed me energy for what seemed like 45 minutes to up my frequency. I know. And I remember when they're like, okay, it is complete. And I was like, all right. I couldn't get up off the chair. I slid off my chair onto the floor and opened the door. And I said to my husband, I was like, I don't know what just happened, but apparently we're going to have a daughter soon. And I wasn't upgraded enough. And I went to bed. And sure enough, it was a couple months later, we got pregnant with her. And she was a tough energy to carry, to be honest. She was so high vibey. So that was one of my most significant experiences with angels. When they come near, especially in that form, they are mighty powerful. I know when they come through to bring messages for people, often it makes me feel like I'm going to fall off my chair because their frequency is so high. Yeah. But when they actually like beamed at me, was, again, I struggle to find the words to explain it. It was beyond this realm.
Have you ever had a sense that you are in direct connection with the creator? Have you ever had those moments when all those voices sort of go away and there's just one being?
I had one experience in a really deep meditation, and it was really interesting because so my mind was really expanded into just like cosmos, right? And then all of a sudden it was brought to this like central point, and I walked into this central point. It was like a central sphere, and it was kind of peachy colored, a really pale peach. And right at the center of it was almost like this pedestal that was peach, and there was something on it, but I can't even explain what the something was. I could say it was a sphere, I could say it was a diamond, but it wasn't anything, but it was a something. And I remember standing there and I was like, what is this? And they said, this is source.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? And it was, this was prior to my NDE. And I remember the amount of bliss and joy, energy I felt in that moment. And like bliss, not in excess, but bliss as in, that's the only word that I could use. And after my NDE, remembering the feeling I had on the other side was like bliss and joy that I couldn't explain. The only thing I could compare it to was that journey, but I've never
Yeah.
really written about that source experience or that God experience because I don't know how to explain it better than this peach thing. And I went in and it was source. Like
Wow.
it's beyond words.
So you talk a little bit about meditation in the
Mhm.
book. How, for somebody that doesn't meditate, what would you recommend as a starting meditative practice? I know a lot of people just sit silently, and they don't know what to quite do, and so everybody has their own techniques that they learn that helps.
Mhm.
What is it that you've learned as a meditative practice that has helped you meditate?
So first of all, I would say try a lot of different things. I think people do get hung up on the sit quietly and let your mind go or think of nothing. That's impossible to think
It's
of
very
nothing,
hard.
especially when you're starting, right? You're like, okay, I'll think of nothing except for my grocery list. And then, it goes on. I think one of the best ways to do it, and I will do this when I find I'm distracted, is to do something that brings you joy, whether that be gardening, painting, listening
Mhm.
to music, dancing, drumming, anything creative, especially, will keep that left brain of yours kind of busy and then allow the right brain to really open up so that you can embrace those higher states of consciousness. Some
Mhm.
people find running really meditative.
Mhm.
And so I think it's looking to what brings you into your most peaceful frequency, what brings you into your feeling of flow, because it's when you hit that feeling of flow is when you can connect in. And so
Right.
whatever that may be for you may be different, and it does not have to be sitting in a traditional meditation. And I mean, even nowadays, there's a lot of people that talk about walking meditations and, even guided meditations or painting meditations. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. So I would say to people that if sitting there with music or no music still doesn't work for you, then try a guided one. If
Right.
that doesn't work for you, what do you enjoy doing that brings you peace? And when you are in that moment of flow, then you can open up and you just need to set the intent to do it and it will come over time.
So you also offer a course on cosmic consciousness on your
Yeah.
website, and the website is it's avalonspirit.com, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me more about that. You're teaching to open up to this cosmic conscious state. Tell me more
Yeah.
about it.
So cosmic consciousness is, I consider it like my baby. I love this course. It's once a month we meet,
Mhm.
and once a month I bring in some higher concept on consciousness, whether we do a whole deep dive on a certain light being. Say we're talking about Pleiadians one day, we deep dive and bring them through. Sometimes I direct channel
Mhm.
information. We've talked about the consciousness of water. We've talked about solar
Wow.
consciousness. We've talked about my gosh, so many different things. It's higher level though, so it has to
Yeah.
be, if someone is drawn to really opening their mind, then cosmic consciousness is a great place to be. I mean, this
Sounds
next month,
fascinating.
yeah, we're going to be talking about 3D and 5D on planet Earth a little bit, what we were talking about Earth
Right.
pushing 5D up through 3D.
Mhm.
So it's all information given to me from the guides, and I try to bring it through as best as I can and as clear as I can, and it's just a lot of fun.
Well, I would love to see some of that in another book, because
Yeah,
yeah. So I'll keep an eye out for your next book.
thank you.
And I just want to thank you for spending the time with me. And I've learned so much. And tell your guides thank you. I
That's
appreciate it.
wonderful.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, everybody needs to check out avalonspirit.com and your wonderful book, Aurora to Avalon, or Avalon to
Avalon
Aurora,
to
right?
Aurora. Yeah.
Avalon to Aurora.
Yeah.
It's an amazing first person account. It talks about so many other things we haven't even covered in this interview. And so thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And welcome to the reality revolution.
That's awesome. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for having me.